We're getting more details about Donald Trump's plans when it comes to the southern border, and they're extreme, I think, to put it mildly. He apparently plans to deploy an absolutely massive number of soldiers to the border, like on the scale, like beyond even the Russian invasion of Ukraine. They're talking about potentially sending up to 300,000 soldiers to the southern border to both apprehend migrants and also set up an industrial scale network of camps and detainment centers. This is according, by the way, to 3 different sources with knowledge of the matter who have talked with either Trump, Stephen Miller, others in his ghoulish circle of immigration policy advisors talking with Rolling Stone. And we're gonna give you a few more details. They basically said they're gonna do this surge of federal troops to totally seal the border. And he plans to give himself sweeping powers on day 1. Remember, that's the one day where he gets to be a dictator, we found out recently. Potentially sending hundreds of thousands of troops. And one of the people talking with Rolling Stone said, I have heard anywhere between 100,000 to 300,000 from President Trump, Stephen Miller, and others on what may be required to get the job done right. There are differences of opinion on how many you would actually need, and everyone has their own ideas. Nothing is set in stone. So again, this is to effectively wall off the border and set up camps, huge numbers of camps. And I have to think that when people, regular people from across America decided to enlist with the US military, what they hoped to do was set up concentration camps across the entirety of our southern border. I think that was the dream for many of them, and finally it might come true if Donald Trump gets his way. Maz, I'm gonna start with you. What do you think about this reporting?
Well, we are the leading country when it comes to imprisonment, so why not keep it going at the border, right? Maybe that's the idea, is we get those prisons to help set up concentration camps on the border, and we'll make the prison industrial complex even more rich and more oppressive towards people that are fleeing a horrible situation. Why not fix the actual immigration policy that we have? Why not look at that? Why not work? Why not say, rather, that's the problem, is that it's very easy to get people, Americans, to be anti-immigrant. I'm an immigrant. And when people go, immigrants are causing this problem and that problem and this problem. Immigrants statistically have committed less crimes in America than Americans. The biggest threat to Americans are Americans. And yet we want to put 100,000 troops, 300,000 troops at the border. How about putting hundreds of thousands of troops around the white supremacists and Donald Trump? And how about putting some troops in front of the Capitol when you know they're going to be attacking it? How about that? How about some of these? It's such a moral dehumanization. It's so easy to dehumanize people, and I hope that we continue to talk about this, and I hope we continue to talk about the cruelty. I'm not saying there's not a problem with immigration. We should fix it. We should care to fix it. But it's so easy to demonize somebody else and say they're why you are making less money, or you are, your insurance prices are up, or whatever the hell they want to make. You have your Governor Abbott sending migrants to all these Democratic cities, and there's a lot of people going like, "That's right, keep doing it." It's such a cruel and dehumanization of people actually fleeing bad problems, which, by the way, a lot of the people fleeing their situations are situations caused by our greed going into their countries, taking their resources, and now they got to escape. So let's not forget that either. So, again, it blows my mind that we're putting these poor people he wants to put those poor people into concentration camps, and he's out free. I don't even know what I'm going to do if he wins. I'm sick of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do have issues with immigration, right? And our issues are that if you live in a country like Mexico and you have a family member here and you want to immigrate, quote unquote, the right way, you could be waiting 21 years. 21 years to be able to do it the supposed right way. And that's something that the Republicans will never tell you when they screech on and on about how people need to come here the right way. They also will never tell you that the same, migrant caravans that they fearmonger about are people who are coming here the supposed right way. They are asylum seekers utilizing international law to come to the United States to declare asylum. And when I was working in immigration law, my clients were all asylum seekers. And hearing the heartbreaking circumstances that they were escaping from, it's the reason why immigration law has such a high turnover rate, because it's so depressing. You have judges that don't let 3-year-olds going through immigration processes in court have an adult with them because they believe they can explain the circumstances to a 3-year-old in a meaningful way. Our system is broken. And one of the ways that the Trump administration really severely damaged the way that we process asylum cases is that there is no rhyme or reason to who gets called up from the waiting list, because once you've declared asylum, you have to go through an interview and you could be waiting. I had a client who was waiting 5 years before I started working with her. And then once Trump came into office, he completely messed up that system and it was just a long game. I don't know if she ever has had her interview yet. And it's just, some insidious, and they weren't highly publicized, but these insidious ways that he manipulated the Department of Homeland Security to make the system more broken than it already was. And hearing what he plans to do and the means through which he plans to do it by utilizing the Insurrection Act, ironically, considering he's Donald Trump, is how he wants to achieve his goal of creating these concentration camps at the border by using the United States military, and that he might be able to do it because the Insurrection Act is written in ways such that it doesn't provide the legal safeguards that it should to prevent a dictatorial president like Donald Trump from utilizing it in that manner.
Yeah. No, you made great points there. Unfortunately, no Republicans listened to you after you said international law. They pretty much tuned out after that. Like, I'm already starting to feel that like pit in my stomach that thankfully went away once Donald Trump thankfully was not successful in getting reelected, of that you were going to wake up every morning to, oh, maybe hundreds of thousands of soldiers are going to the border again. Like that utterly insane news on a daily basis. And it could well come. I mean, it's gonna be back to, finding out that there's Oval Office conversations about putting spikes on top of the wall, and maybe we could have a moat with alligators, and maybe we should shoot them in the leg. Like this utterly insane cartoon approach to policy. And that is potentially coming back in. And honestly, for some of it, you might not even have to wait until Donald Trump gets elected. We'll end with this. I will remind you that right now, Joe Biden, who wants to get more aid to send to Ukraine, which we'll be talking about later on the show, is running up against Republican demands that he give in a massive number of different ways on the topic of immigration to get that aid. And so that could include restrictions on asylum, new legal authorities for mass numbers of migrants to be deported with far less or no due process. And honestly, with Joe Biden being the person engaging in these conversations, like we know what immigration policy under Joe Biden has been like during his first term. It's not exactly the same as Donald Trump, but there was far more continuity than most people, either Biden supporters or Trump supporters, want to admit to. And so like when I see CBS News say he now finds himself entertaining drastic and permanent restrictions, I have to wonder, like, to what extent is he backed into the corner? Like, I don't think that he's not Stephen Miller or anything, but I don't know, has he been like a champion on this topic for migrant rights and the decency of asylum? People requesting asylum throughout his career. I feel like there is more equivalence in approach to this policy than is being admitted by the national media. And when the stakes are as high as they are, I find that to be very worrisome. Rayyvana, I want to go to you first. Fast final comment before we move on.
Yeah, I'll just end by saying you're exactly right. I worked in immigration law under the end of the Trump administration, the beginning of the Biden administration, at a time in my life where I was much less jaded and had a lot more optimism about the changes that were going to come. And I didn't see them, and we haven't seen them, not in a strong, meaningful capacity. Some of the changes we have seen were changes that came through courts telling Joe Biden that he had to reverse Trump era policies, and not the Biden administration, actually doing and delivering on the promises that they made on the campaign trail. We had Kamala Harris telling migrants do not come without taking any meaningful measures to reverse, as Maz pointed out, the United States policies that cause the crises, that cause the influx of immigration in the first place. Something I heard a lot, and I'll just end with this, working in asylum law, was that these asylum seekers, they didn't want to come here. They were forced to come here. They would much rather live in their countries of origin where their families are, where they know the language that's primarily spoken, but they were forced by mostly things that the United States created in their country, economic circumstances, large scale corruption, forced them to leave their homes and come to the United States just to be met with racism, hostility, and horrific xenophobic immigration policy.
Yeah. Maz, final thoughts?
Yeah, I would always say that there's no people aren't sitting around going like, wow, my family's here, I got a job, I have everything, I speak the language. Let me go somewhere where I don't speak the language and they're gonna hate me. Exactly what Rayyvana just said, that these people aren't dying to come over here either. And the unfortunate thing is how easy it is to manipulate the general population to be against immigrants. And I don't know if I sat down one-on-one with Joe Biden where his mind would be, if he'd be sympathetic and empathetic to their cause. But the fact that he has to have these policies that if he doesn't, I think part of it is that he'll get the pushback from the Republicans saying like, oh, look at how weak you are. They already say it regardless. As you said, John, his policies haven't changed that much from the Trump policies, and yet they're still attacking him. And it's heartbreaking. Like Americans, we're supposed to be sympathetic and accept people. It's just so hypocritical because a lot of these people are also like hardcore Christians. They're like, I'm Christian, but don't come and shoot them at the border. You're like, where'd your Christianity go?
Thanks for watching. If you become a member, you get to watch all this ad-free, except for, of course, this ad. Still, hit the join button below.